Module 4, Flow Button Triggers, is more about how to run the flow than it is about building the flow. So we'll be looking at a similar flow in all these circumstances, but how we can trigger that from different locations. So one will be looking at triggering it from a hyperlink, and I'll be doing this hyperlink in a SharePoint site where it's convenient to the user. You can also run this from a PowerApps Canvas app, and I'll show you how to do that. But it will also trigger flows from a mobile phone and also from something called a Flic button. And we'll be looking at all these 4 concepts. My demonstrations are going to have one thing in common: making it easier for the user to process the stationary request. So I'm going to be looking at how to do this quite simply from the SharePoint site by making an obvious link they can click on. But I'm also going to do it through a PowerApps Canvas app. So if you're new to PowerApps, I'm just going to go very lightly into the form design of this, nothing more. The last 2 demonstrations are going to be visual because we don't use mobile phones in the training course, and I don't have a Flic button. But I'll show you where you can get them, where you can obtain them, and how they're used to run your Power Automate flows. I'm continuing on with my stationary orders, but what I need now is one single automate flow that will manage the entire life cycle of a request. So it would look through the status, and at each turn of the status, it will then action what's required. And I'm going to do this through different stages. So I'm going to do the link the user activate through a column. There'll be a hyperlink here, and then I'll do the PowerApps. It's the same sort of procedure, but different ways the user can interact with it. Okay, so I need to start with a brand new flow, and this is going to be an instant one. And I'm going to call this process request. But this time I want it to be on the trigger of a selected item, so the user will select the item and then action it. Okay, click create. There it is for selected item. I'm going to go back and grab the website. So it was human resources in my last examples. The actions and everything else is the same. I've just got it in a new site. And just in case it hasn't remembered it, there it is. I've copied and pasted it anyway, but there you go. Brilliant. So make sure that I've got the stationary orders in there. Again, make sure you're picking up the right one. So it's for a selected item, for a list, not for a selected file, for a library. Great stuff. Okay. Next thing I'll do is go in then and get the item. So once we triggered what item we want to select, we want to now pull in all the data. So we're going to use a SharePoint action called get item. There we go. Same address, so it's going to be the Office Wi-Fi support, it's going to be the stationary orders, and I'm going to pull in the ID of what the trigger grabbed. So whichever one they ticked, actioned, I'm going to pull in as per 4. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to check the status of the stationary request, but I could use a conditional control, but that will create a very nasty nest of, if this is true, if it was called draft, then do this, else test to see if it's requested, if true, do this, else if status equals approved, and it becomes horrible. A much easier way to test one property or one variable against multiple different values is to use a control called switch. Now switch is covered later in another module, but it's very quick and easy to show. I can demonstrate it now, and then we'll reflect on it in the later module. So first of all, I tell it what property or value I want to test on. So I'm going to ask for the status value of the item. And then inside each case, I then tell it what value I'm testing for. I'm switching between, if you like. So I'm going to test to say if the user's still in draft mode, this will change it to the state requested, and then we'll then ask for approval. So I'm going to say add an action, and the action will be first of all to change that item. So we're going to update item using SharePoint from the Office 365 support site again, and from the stationary orders. And the item I want it to update is the one that matches the item that the user ticked. So get item. Either both of these are exactly the same, so it doesn't matter which one I pick. So I want it to update only the status. So the title or the item's name is the same. The quantity is to remain the same. The only thing it's going to do then is just mark this as requested. Once it's done that, it will then send off an approval. So I'm going to create an approve process. We cover these on the Power Automate Essentials course, the course preceding this. So if you're new to approval, I'll do a little intro, but I'll keep it very, very short and sweet. It's using the approvals data connector, and from there I can either do a create an approval, add some actions, and then wait. I want to keep it simple. I want to start the approval and then wait straight away. So I'm going to go in there and tell it what approval type I want, and this is just to grab the first person who approves it. We're happy. And in the title, which is part of the email message that this sends off automatically, I'm going to put in there stationary request requires approval. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to assign this to my account I'm using. I'm using my own John Day account, and I'm going to put in some details. Now, if you haven't seen Markdown before, I'll cover this later on. There's a great couple of websites where you can learn about Markdown characters. But in short, Markdown is a way of taking plain Notepad sort of outlining, sort of like, you know, borders that you create or marking things up to look like it's outstanding or sort of strongly quoted. It takes those characters and then actually puts them into a sort of a style format. If I put a hash at the beginning of some text, it marks it as a heading 1. As 2 hashes, marks it as a heading level sort of style 2. Heading 3 is 3 hashes. You get the idea. At the end of that, I'm going to put a little carriage return. Just going to put in a little quote that says, please action the following stationary request and approve. And then I'm going to create a table. Tables are used using pipe characters, which is shift and backslash, allowing you to sort of mark up different sort of columns. Again, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about Markdown at a later stage, but I also have a YouTube video that actually shows Markdown, which I'll give a link to at some point. Okay, so I'm going to put to make sure that that looks like a header, it stands out in bold. I'm going to put a little separator bar, and you can see I'm putting colons on the left or right hand side of each column, and that actually denotes the alignment. So my items with the colon on the left makes the text left aligned. The quantity, because it's numbers, I've got the colon on the right, and it actually shows a right aligned. And then I've got the dates on the left, which you can argue whether it goes on the left or right. And then I'm going to put the items in. So I'm just going to go and copy the items values underneath. Item, pipe, quantity, pipe, and then the requested by, I want the display name. So you can't see it there, but I'll put the display name in there. That'll do. And then I'm going to do a link to the items, then click it and view it. And the display text will be the item's name, requested by, and then the person who modified it last. So that'll be the display name again. There you go. So I've just quickly created an approval. I've marked in all the content there. So once it's been changed to the value requested, marks it for approval. We'll wait for the approval to come back, and then we do an action upon the response. So the control will be a condition again, and we're going to say if the approver's outcome is equal to, and I'm going to put approve, which is the correct value for status changes, either approve or reject. If it's approved, yes, go into here, just a change the item again. I'm going to try and copy this and see if it will paste it in here. Looks like it's, if it's collapsed, it normally means good. Yeah, so it seems to have done it. But you can see I've got a lot of update item, so I really should have done things like rename update item to requested and update item to approved, just in case I copy it again, as I will do, and stick it in the no. All I've got to do is take that one and then just paste that and change it to yes, that was approved. And if it's a no, so I'm going to copy that one because it's pretty much done everything I need. Go into here and paste it, so that one there. Great, all I've got to do is then rename it again to update item as rejected. That's as far as I'm going to go. I could email to the user, let them know, I could say thank you very much, send them a bunch of flowers, that sort of thing. But I think with this will be fine. But the idea, again, as I say, is not about the flow itself. It's more about actually getting this to trigger. So here comes the magic. I want to create a hyperlink that's going to sit inside this list, and the user will see it on the right hand side here. In fact, because it's sitting on the right hand side and everyone can see it, whoever clicks it will trigger the status onto the very next process. So it's kind of a rudimentary example, but it will do. So first of all, I need a column. I just need some sort of column to populate the hyperlink in. So I'm going to put in there a column called process, and it's going to be a single line of text. And you'll see why I'm using a single line of text. I'm borrowing the column. It's not going to store any true value in it. It's really being borrowed for the purpose of a hyperlink. So the next thing I need to make this happen is I need to go and grab the ID, the actual code of that Power Automate flow. Now you can't do this within Teams. So when I click on the link and view the Power Automate flow, you can see there's a very lengthy, horrible address at the top there. But this is not showing. This is not showing inside Teams the ID for the flow. What I have to do is get this from the Power Automate page. So I'm going to go in and I'm now going to view all of my flows, all of my Power Automates, whatever the correct terminology will be by Microsoft to come. And don't forget, it's a team flow. And there it is, there's the process request. So I need to click on that, and this actually gives me the correct ID for that flow. So if you look very carefully, as I go into the main list, you'll see there's one ID already. Okay, so that's unique ID presenting me with my flow list. Okay, so when I click, the only thing that changes then after that is the actual code at the end there. So that one is the ID. That's the actual unique identifier for my flow, and I need to copy that in memory, and you'll see why, because we're about to venture into our first example of JSON. So for the purpose of the course and the guided activities that you follow, the author has put a nice simple link that you will use to grab that code that we need. It's actually pointing, as I'll show you now, to a website guided by Microsoft that has lots of different examples for JSON code that you put into conditional formatting. What you're looking for, and the best thing to do on this page when you get to this page, is do a Control F, a search, and you're searching for execute flow, which is all one word, and that will take you straight down to, there's a bit of code called create a button to launch flow. Okay, so there should be a link or a file in the resources with a text file where you can just copy and paste that, but just in case there isn't, you can use that link that I put on screen. You can then type that in, scroll down the page, or look for or find execute flow, and it's under create a button to launch a flow. And what you want to do is you want to copy all that code. So I'm going to close my find off, click copy, copy that code. Okay, now I want to return back to my stationary orders, and this is where that process column that I created comes in. The column name could be anything you like, and for simplicity, use a text or a string single line of text column. Go into that column, click the drop down arrow, go to the column settings, and then format this column. Now what you may find is you may get a box come up allowing you to do conditional formatting. You're looking for an advanced option. If you see one, I don't have that. It's taking me straight to the box where I can go in there and paste the code. That's the first thing. Now you could do this in Notepad to keep it cleaner, but what you're looking for is there's two things that you want to do. One is that link, that code that you had for the flow ID. You need to copy that. So I'm going to select that again and copy it. And inside that block, you're going to look for one that says action, execute flow. Underneath it, there's an action parameters. And we've already looked about JSON, how things done. So this is basically looking for the ID, colon, and there's the value. What you want to do is grab the value that's already in there, get rid of it because it's just a sample one, and you want to replace it with the ID that you pasted. Okay, it goes inside the double quotes and just before a backslash at the end there, so very careful. That's the first step. The second step is to go to the bottom, and there's some text content, and this is what text you would like the hyperlink to display inside the column. So it says there's center manager. I'm going to put in there process request. So I might want to use that link for multiple stages of the same flow. So people don't get confused, I've actually built one flow that everyone can click the link and it will take it on to the next step, which is to change the status. So I'm going to save that. And look at what it's done. It's now provided a process request text that I've asked for. And it's going to now run that flow that I've passed into there. So fingers crossed, I've got a draft there that I've already got prepared. So I'm going to tick that one. And in fact, I don't need to tick it because with the user, they can click the link on the right hand side. And that is now starting the flow. And what will happen is it will change the status to requested. So I'm waiting for that to start, give it a little bit of time to kick in, and then I'm going to press F5 on my SharePoint list. That shows me that it is now running. It's marked it's requested, and now the approval email's gone off. Let's go and have a look at that. There it is. Look at that magic. But the great thing about it is, in case no one approves it for a day or so, that stays as requested until the approval is done. So there it is. There's the request. There's my item. I can mark it as approved or rejected. I can add some text in there as well. I've not captured the text. So the text I put in here will be completely pointless. Looks good to me. If you do want to cover approvals, as I say, we do have that on the Essentials course, and it shows you the ins and outs of that. So I'm just going to mark that as approved, submit it. Marvelous. And that's now marked as approved. Brilliant. So that was again, it's not so much about the flow steps, but it's more about, okay, we can't rely on a user to tick that box and then click that box and click that box, which is where the process request is stored. So they can do that. It's already stored in there. And it's automatic because the trigger was for a selected item and I pointed to this list in this site, so it stuck it in that box. But to make it easier for the user, so they don't sort of ignore it, there's a big link there they can't miss, and that allows them to process the request. So that's my first step in doing a flow from a link, which is in the book as well, which is really good. Second method in which I can get the user to process this request is to customize the form. So a couple of things I can do here. One, the form's a bit boring, it's a bit plain, and it really could do with a a bit of a facelift, if you like. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do some extra things like, the item list is a text box, and you might hear a lot of people say, oh, you can't turn that into a drop down list box because it's built in, it's intrinsic. Rubbish. I'm going to prove that I can actually turn that into a drop down list box, and the quantity for a mobile phone with a big stubby finger, being able to type in numbers is not good, so I would like that to turn that into like a slider bar, if you like. And then I'm going to customize it so it's got a little button at the top. I'm going to click save, and the idea is that that save button will run the Power Automate flow that I wish to build. So without further ado, all I need to do is just get that form on screen. If it's editing a form or creating a new, it doesn't matter, because I just want to get that form on screen and then launch from the ellipsis here, customize with PowerApps. So give that a click. That now alerts me to PowerApps. Now, if the first time you're running PowerApps, if you've never used it before, it takes a little while for it to build up all the components it needs on your browser. And then when that's happened, it will then display the original or the current version of that form. And it looks something like this. Thank you very much. Yes, Skip. So again, we do a lot of time on the PowerApps Essentials. We've got a great course that is covered by Brett Appleby, and it goes really good in detail into how the PowerApps layout works. But I just want to do this very, very quickly, explain how this works. So on the left-hand side, you've got our components and objects we need. We've got the SharePoint integration data connect, if you like. We've got the form that you can see here, and the form is basically the data map, if you like, the data connection, pulling the data in that the user interacts with. And that's sitting on like a screen, like a page, if you like. And that whole entire white box is the form screen. And if I click the SharePoint form one, you can see that is actually the component that sits on top of that then maps the data to the user. Now I'm going to just take that form and just drag it down, because I want to put a nice lovely header at the top. So I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and I'm going to use the icons, the least place you would look for rectangles and shapes and things, but there's the icons. If I scroll to the very, very bottom, there's all our shapes, and somewhere at the top there's a rectangle. So click that. That plops into place. As I plop that in, you can see it's given it a name, rectangle 1. Normally you name these painstakingly, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to drag that rectangle across the top. That's going to be my new banner, and then just going to click away from that, and then I'm going to add from the Insert tab again a label, which is just a display text. The user can't interact with labels. They would normally interact with text boxes, as you can see there. So the label, just going to pop that in there, just move that over to the side, and I would like to move to the properties right hand side over here, and I'm going to now just change what I want the text to say. So that will say SharePoint, that's not SharePoint, you tweet, stationery request. And I'm going to just change the formatting of this. So I'm going to make the font size about 24, which looks a bit big. Cover that in a minute. Further down, I'm going to go down to the color and change that to white. There we go. So that's good. It's all done. And the last thing I'll do is just going to change the font weight to make it a proper bold, if you like. And now I'm just going to change the height and then make it wider so that you can see that heading nice and clear. There you go. And the last thing I'm going to put at the top here is a nice big save button, so the users can press that on their mobile phone, make life easier. So over here, I'm going to go to the Insert tab again, go back into the icons, and just a little way down there, a save button would be useful for this. Okay, now typical Microsoft, blue ink on a blue background, clever mix. So that's not a problem. Same again, go to the color here and just change that to the color I want. I'll make that white, make that stand out. Okay, now bear in mind all those lovely components I've done, like the height and the width of the text box and things. These can be done from the panel on the right hand side, and there's also a sort of box at the top right corner here where I can also do all of that and even code it with expressions. So lovely. And expressions are very similar to Power Automate. So you can create functions, and in the functions you have brackets passing the arguments. So the actual expression syntax is very similar once you get used to this. Okay, so I'm now going to take that form There it is. And you can see when I click on this, it's very hard to try and grab the correct component. So when selecting an object, if you know it by its name, grab it from the left-hand side. It's so much easier to do. I've now correctly selected the form. Now I'm going to just expand that and fill up the rest of the space there. There we go. Now, as you can see, each of these fields of data has got a caption, it's got the actual control, the interface, and there's other things like, is it a mandatory field? You just see that very slight star there to say it's mandatory. If there's an error, there's an error box hidden away that comes up and displays in red, and all of those components are stored in a card. So each field is collected to a card. So the item's got a card, the quantity's got a card, and so on. And each of those cards has got a data value, if you like. So I've got a card value, that's for the text box, and I've got a card value for the quantity. Okay, so I'd like to change that slider so that when they use it, it doesn't go from 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 100. It's kind of extreme. I'd like to do like a 1 to 20 or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into click the data card. And there it is. It's highlighted in grey there in the bottom right corner, bottom left corner. So I'm going to expand that. And what I want to do is I want to set the value range that they can work between. So I'm going to click that data card value. There we go. And on the right hand side, I'm now going to go in and change the minimum maximum. You can see there. So the minimum is 0, great, and the maximum is 100. Oh, weird. It's all locked down. I can't change it. Well, it is locked down and I can change it, but by default it's protecting it on my behalf, so I don't make any kind of wizzo changes by mistake. So if I go to the advanced tab of a data card data value, you can see the ability to unlock it. So I'm just going to go to that padlock there, unlock it, and that's saying I purposely intend to change the data. Okay, so that's now done. What I want to do is just make sure that I set the minimum and maximum to the appropriate value. So if I click that option, go into the advanced, as you see on the right hand side, and you can see the minimum and maximum properties. What I want to do in here is just set them to static values. I want the minimum to be 0, which is a bit, actually I want the minimum to be 1. If they're not, if it's a 0, there's no point ordering it. So let's put in a 1 in there, great. And then I'm going to set, oops, clicked away by mistake. I'm going to set the maximum to 20. Don't know what that's in there. That shouldn't even be in there, but those are the static values. So 1 and 20 are the static numbers I want. Okay, what's next? I can go into the item. Don't want that to be a text box. I want them to choose from a list of choices. Now the choices are already coming through the SharePoint list. I could go and grab them, pull them through, but I want to show JSON. I want to show, in case you ever need this, how to do the JSON. So I'm going to go into the item card, change the control type to an allowed values. So that will now give me a drop down box where we can provide the values that are allowed to be changed. So once again, I'm going to provide that list of values. I need to select the card, go to the advanced tab on the right side, unlock it. Once that's done, I now need to go into the values selection itself, where the values are stored. Actually click on the box. You'll see it says data card value in the bottom left corner there. And I'm now going to go into the panel on the right hand side. I'm going to go into the advanced tab there. So what you'll see is it says the items are from the parent dot allowed values, so that's being pulled through. I'm going to just, as I say, just go in there and pull that as the code, just in case you want to do this. So what I'm going to do is, and again, it's a data array, not an object array, so I'm going to use single square or parameter brackets. Let me zoom this in so you can see what I'm doing here. There we go. And then inside here, I'm going to put in just the data. So I'm going to put in things like paper, A4 plain, comma, and then I'm going to put in various others. I'm going to speed through these now and not narrate them. Okay, And the last bit there is just to close down the square brackets. And please note, I'm not tabbing or shift tabbing to indent. So when I did the square brackets, put the data in, the block is already aligning the content for me. All you've got to do is just make sure the values are correct. So value in double quotes there, and all of them separated by commas. So I've missed out the commas there. There we go. That seems to be a lot tidier. Excellent. Right. And I'm now going to zoom that out. That's all done beautifully. And what I'm going to do is the last thing I'll do is to keep this very, very clean, because I don't want the user seeing the status, let alone changing it. That's all going to be done through my Power Automate flow processing. So I'm going to select the status. I'm going to go back to the properties card. I could click any field. All I want to do is get that edit button there, and that brings up my edit parameters. And from here, I'm just going to now remove the status field. Don't need it. So I'm going to remove it. I'm going to remove the processing. Remember, the process is just a column I used for the links in SharePoint. It's not been storing your data. And every list that you build has an attachments point. You can go into the list settings, and in the advanced settings, you can turn off attachments. I can also remove it from here as well, so it doesn't matter. But now I've got a really lovely form that just looks so quick and easy for them to process a stationery. It's kind of very attractive for them to use. All I've got to do now is just save the form. Go to the File tab, click Save. And I'm not going to publish it because I've still got work to do. It's not ready yet. I'm just going to go back to the form design there and give it a go. Now, the next step is to write the Power Automate. So, to do this, I want the Power Automate to trigger on the user selecting that save button. They click it, press it with their finger, whatever the case. So you'll find that there is, if I click on that save button, there is, you can see there in this trigger list here, in this property, it's got an on select. Brilliant. And then with the on select, it's got false. In other words, it's just not doing anything. And I want that to have and call a Power Automate and tell it to run that Power Automate. So the beauty of this is through the Actions tab, I can actually select the Power Automate, or if it doesn't exist, I can build it. So if I give that a click, this will go into my flows and show me any Power Automate specific flows that I've got. I haven't got any. So at this point, I'm going to create a new flow. Now, most important, I don't need to do any of this. I mean, the idea is I could click a button and have that submit the data straight back to SharePoint list. That's a PowerApps thing. That's very easy. The whole point of this is to show how I can now make that button do clever stuff. I can make it easier by submitting the data into the list through Power Automate, and even send emails and all kinds of magical stuff. So I'm going to click the create a new flow. And you can see there's lots of built-in triggers that I could actually use. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the one that says click a button in PowerApps to send an, in fact, click add an item to SharePoint and send an email. There we go. That's the one I want, because I'm lazy. Okay, so going to continue with those data connectors that it needs. There they are. It's all popped in. And what's happened is it's already provided certain particular things. And when I'm finished, the PowerApps function that I'm going to run in the brackets, in the arguments, it's going to ask me for this information, the email to send it to, and the title, the create item title, which I'm going to grab through the title field. So when I go into the site address, I'm going to get the data and place it into the same SharePoint list. As I say, I'm doing this as a demonstration. I don't really need to create the item from here. I could have done it from the PowerApps. But there's nothing to stop me actually putting it in. So there's the item. Wonderful. The quantity. Now, the quantity is not being passed through. So you can see that when I click in quantity, I can go and ask in PowerApps for that information. And what it means is I'll have to pass that in the PowerApps expression. I have to pass that data, will tell it, pass this quantity through, so it comes to this screen, into the flow, and then I can then use it here. So if I do ask in PowerApps, as you can see, it's already found the quantity connected in PowerApps. The status value, I'm going to mark that as requested. That's going to kick in my other flow that then sends the approval. So it's all magic stuff. And don't forget the process column was just used for a hyperlink, so there's no data that needs to go in there. Okay, so this is all to do, and against the flow, so I can go crazy with this. I could do all kinds of things that maybe I didn't know how to do in PowerApps, so I would do some really crazy stuff with the form besides just saving the data. Let's click save. Brilliant. And now I need to do is, now that I've saved that, I need to go back to the PowerApps tab, and you'll see that it's now created that item. So it's one that called add an item to SharePoint and send an email. So that's the actual name of the process. Now what I do is click it. It's now adding it. It's adding that to PowerAutomate as an expression that's going to go inside the onSelect. You can see now it's all built it in for me. So it's saying, okay, you're now going to run this. So add an item to SharePoint and send an email, and we'll run it. Now in the open brackets, as you can see right above here, it's telling me what information I've pulled into the PowerAutomate that now needs me to send. So I need to send the title, an email, and the quantity. Okay, so we know that it's in these fields. So if I click that card for the item, that highlights over here in the bottom here that belongs to data card value 1. I'm also looking for the quantity, and that's data card value 2. That sounds straightforward. So I'm now going to click back on the save button here. You can see it's just pulled me back to the onSelect. If it hasn't, I could go back to the onSelect and then just finish the expression. So it's asking for that data card value 1 dot, and now it wants the properties that I'm pulling through. So I want from that range there, selected dot value. So out of all the items selected, I want the value of the selected item. Okay, so bear in mind, selected means it can bring back the unique ID of the requested, approved, and so on. What I want to bring back is the value of that item that's selected. Great, comma, what's next? Needs the email. Well, that just could be my email address, john.day@qsp.info, comma, what's it asking for next? The create item quantity. So I know that that is data card value 2. That's not a drop down box, that's just numbers, so that is just dot value. There we go. Okay, close brackets. Now, as I said, if I wanted to submit the data from the PowerApps, what I could do is semicolon. That allows me to write multiple extra sort of statements in this expression. So I could do submit form. There's only one form that I can submit, as we know, it's that SharePoint form 1 bracket. I could do that, but like I said, the PowerAutomate is doing that. So I don't want to do both because I end up having the item in the list twice. So I just want to show that I can do that. That's how you do it inside PowerApps in case you want to play. What I want to do is make sure this form closes down. Otherwise it will stay there and the user will have to close it down manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the exit function, and then there's an argument of logout. So I'm going to say false. It's asking, if we close down this form, should we log the user out of their account in Office 365? No, because they could be doing some other work. But that could be an option if they're in a mobile phone. Once they submit the form, I could shut the form down and shut down the app in the form and let them get on with what they're doing. So there's lots of possibilities for that. Okay, job done. I'm happy. Just want to make sure that the code is not angry. There's no underlined red text, which normally means no. That's all good. I like that. I'm going to collapse it up again. And I'm ready to save, and I'm ready to submit. So let's publish this final copy of my form, and let's go and see if the little blighter works. So you can see that when you publish forms, you can see that there's lots and lots of versions. There'll be the version 1, which is the original. I did the save version 2. I've done lots of saves, so I'm very, very sort of specific about saving and not losing crashes things. And some of this I've done over several dates, as you can see. So here I've got version 6. That's the one that I've just published, and that's the one that's live. Great stuff. Let's go back to SharePoint, find out how if this works or not. So, and let's create a brand new one. There we go. As you can see, I've got some demos there, but I've misspelt the name, so I corrected that on this video. So I've got pens. Let's do the hole punch. Look, I can have up to 20 items, or I can have 1. I did leave it to default to 20. I should have actually had that default to 1. That's something I've got to fix. But there you go. And if I click save, oh, okay, it heard me. So there we go. So if again, I can just refresh that data. Come on, refresh that data. There's my hole punch, and that was done just a few seconds ago. Marvelous. So that is now in requested state. So they could have done it via the PowerApps. They could have done it through this link. So many different ways we could do things, and it's just magic. I love it. Really love the PowerApps and Power Automate and how they sort of can gel together really, really well. A bit of planning. Okay, there we go. So, as if by the magic of video, I can show my mobile phone device to you, and we can see how this actually works from a mobile phone. So I'm looking at my Office 365 support site page. Unfortunately, you can't see my finger pressing, so I'm just going to hover over and show you where I'm going first. There's a bit of dual action going on here. There you go. So I'm going to just now sort of press that stationary orders, click, and well, it's a bit of a shame because my mobile phone's showing the full form, but for some reason the simulation on the screen there's got it a little bit zoomed in. But nevertheless, doesn't matter. I can still go in there, and you can see I can go in and add items from my mobile phone, which is really cool. Let's do quite a few of them. And I'm just going to go and click that Save button, and off it goes. Okay. And there's the new item just come in a minute ago because it's taken a while to scroll. But there's my 9 stationary staplers that I've just ordered. So that's really you know, it's fantastic. I really have got the ability to really make connect to users using mobile first technologies that Microsoft's pushing out with Power Automate, and as you've seen, PowerApps, which is great. So besides mobile phone buttons that you can build in the app, big blue buttons that you can actually use to run flows, you can also get physical buttons, and these are called Flic buttons. So if I go into amazon.co.uk as an example, you can see I can do a search for Flic, F-L-I-C, and you've got these different buttons that you can purchase. Now, different buttons are available. You can have one that just does a click, one that can do a click and a double click, one can do click and hold. So there's different types of ones, and each action can then trigger a different bit of code or a different sort of snippet. In this case, you can make them trigger different Power Automate flows. So Flic uses sort of a process called IoT, which is Internet of Things, it stands for, and it allows you to connect wirelessly to other devices, and also to, again, cloud applications like Office 365 Power Automate, and just do actions of your choice. So you could, I mean, one of the common ones that I've seen being used is where we had a responsive team of operators, call operators. So when they want to switch their team status to away from the office, and they're on intensive calls, they could just press the Flic button and then just walk away, take a breather, and then come back and press the Flic again, and it just switches them back and forth so that people know if they're at the desk or away. So, but besides that, you can use these for convenience of running a flow from pretty much anywhere you need to. So you've seen me add a simplified version of an approval to a button. And also used a button from PowerApps just to run a similar sort of circumstances demonstration, and I used that to demonstrate how I can just use a mobile app. But you can build mobile apps. The proper app will actually build buttons, and then you just seen the Flic button as well. which makes life a little easier from the physical pressing side rather than from a laptop. There you go, that's Module 4.